Chosen one. The moment they sat down to discuss a new marriage proposal, a name nobody expected suddenly entered the conversation. A secret that had been buried for months refused to stay hidden any longer. One sentence changed the entire atmosphere in the room. And before the night was over, everyone was forced to confront a truth about you that nobody was prepared to hear. Listen carefully, because this story is not about a simple marriage match. It is about what happens when fate refuses to let two souls be forgotten. Your person never expected that day to become one of the most emotional and uncomfortable moments of their life. The family believed they were gathering for something hopeful, something practical, something that would finally move life forward. Relatives arrived with smiles. Parents exchanged polite words. Questions about the future filled the room. Everything appeared normal on the surface. But beneath that calm atmosphere, your person was carrying something they had never fully confessed to anyone. They had spent so much time pretending they were ready to move on that eventually even they started trying to believe the lie. Yet deep inside, there was still one name that refused to disappear. There was still one memory that followed them into quiet nights. There was still one person whose absence never truly became normal. And that person was you. The discussion began the way these conversations always begin. People talked about compatibility. They talked about families, values, plans, and expectations. Every answer your person gave sounded polite and reasonable. They smiled when expected. They nodded when expected. They participated just enough to avoid suspicion. But every time someone mentioned marriage, a strange feeling settled over them. It was not fear. It was not uncertainty. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of standing in front of a future that looked correct on paper but felt completely wrong in the heart. They kept wondering why they could not feel excited. Why every imagined future seemed incomplete. Why every possibility somehow led their thoughts back to you. Don't skip. As the evening continued, one family member noticed something unusual. Your person was physically present but emotionally distant. Questions had to be repeated. Conversations drifted past them without receiving much attention. At first nobody thought much of it. But eventually someone laughed and asked a simple question. Are you sure you even want this marriage? The room laughed lightly. It was meant as a joke. Yet the question landed harder than anyone realized. For a brief moment your person froze. Their smile faded. Their eyes dropped toward the floor. And in that tiny silence, several people suddenly sensed that something was wrong. The conversation moved on, but the atmosphere had already changed. Later that night, while details of the proposal were being discussed more seriously, another unexpected moment occurred. One of the older relatives mentioned that commitment requires letting go of the past. Again, the statement was casual. Again, it was not directed at anyone in particular. But your person reacted instantly. Their expression shifted so noticeably that multiple people saw it. Suddenly questions began forming in people's minds. What past? Was there someone before? Was there a story nobody knew? Had they been hiding something all this time? The answers arrived sooner than anyone expected. Don't skip. One relative who had known your person for years quietly pulled them aside and asked directly, "Is there someone you still think about?" For several seconds they said nothing. They tried to avoid the question. They tried to laugh it off. But some truths become heavier every time they remain unspoken. Eventually your person looked away and whispered something that changed everything. They admitted that despite all the time that had passed, despite every attempt to move forward, there was still one person whose memory had never left. One person they compared everyone else to. One person whose absence still influenced every major decision they made. When asked who that person was, they spoke your name. The relative stared at them in shock. Not because they knew the full story, but because they could see the emotion in your person's eyes. The kind of emotion that cannot be faked. The kind of emotion that only survives when feelings never truly ended. That conversation should have remained private. But fate had different plans. Before long, pieces of the truth began reaching other family members. Whispers became discussions. Discussions became concerns. And concerns became direct questions. Soon the entire focus of the evening shifted away from the marriage proposal and toward the mystery surrounding you. Nobody expected that. Least of all your person. Don't skip. The more questions they faced, the harder it became to maintain old defenses. For months they had convinced themselves that silence was easier. Silence required no explanations. Silence protected everyone from uncomfortable conversations. But now silence was collapsing. Every answer revealed another piece of the truth. Every confession uncovered another hidden feeling. Family members who had once assumed your story was over suddenly realized it had never actually ended. They began asking why your person had never moved on. Why they never seriously pursued anyone else. Why every relationship possibility eventually failed. And for the first time, your person stopped giving safe answers. Instead, they told the truth. They said nobody else ever felt like you. They said nobody else ever created the same sense of peace. They said every attempt to replace what existed between you only reminded them of what was missing. And when those words left their mouth, the room fell completely silent, because nobody had expected honesty that raw. Nobody had expected feelings that deep. And nobody had expected your name to carry so much power after all this time. Don't skip. The marriage proposal that was supposed to represent a fresh beginning suddenly became something entirely different. Instead of discussing the future, everyone found themselves confronting the past. Relatives who had previously encouraged moving on started questioning whether that was even possible. Parents who believed old emotions had faded realized they were still alive. Some family members became emotional. Others became frustrated. Some argued that love alone is not enough. Others argued that ignoring genuine feelings only creates future regret. The room divided into different opinions, but one fact remained impossible to deny. Your person's heart had already revealed its truth, and once truth is spoken aloud, it becomes impossible to pretend it never existed. The hours that followed became some of the most emotionally exhausting of their life. Questions came from every direction. Advice came from every direction. Expectations came from every direction. Yet through all the noise, your person kept returning to the same thought. You. Not the proposal. Not the future being presented to them. Not the pressure surrounding them. You. Because deep inside, they knew the shocking truth everyone had finally uncovered was not actually shocking to them at all. They had known it for a long time. They simply lacked the courage to admit it. Until now. Don't skip. The silence that followed those confessions felt heavier than anything your person had experienced before. Nobody in the room seemed to know what to say next. The marriage proposal that had looked so promising only a few hours earlier was now hanging by a thread. Relatives exchanged uncertain glances. Parents sat quietly, trying to process everything they had just heard. And your person, after years of hiding behind half-truths and polite smiles, suddenly felt exposed in a way they never had before. It was as if a locked door had finally been forced open, revealing emotions they had spent so long trying to keep hidden from the world. One elder eventually broke the silence. Looking directly at your person, they asked a question nobody had dared to ask before. If these feelings are truly still alive, then why didn't you fight for them? The room became even quieter. Every eye turned toward your person. They opened their mouth to answer, then stopped. Because the truth was far more complicated than anyone realized. It wasn't that they never wanted to fight. It wasn't that they lacked courage. It was that life had placed obstacles between you that felt impossible to overcome. Time passed. Circumstances changed. Opportunities disappeared. And little by little, they convinced themselves that destiny had already made the decision for them. But deep inside, a small part of them never stopped wondering. What if they had tried harder? What if they had spoken sooner? What if fear had not controlled so many of their choices? Those questions had haunted them for longer than anyone knew. Don't skip. As the discussion continued, something unexpected happened. One of the older family members, someone who rarely shared personal stories, began talking about their own life. They spoke about a person they once loved but never pursued because they believed circumstances made it impossible. They explained how they spent decades wondering what might have happened if they had chosen differently. The room listened carefully. There was sadness in their voice, but also wisdom. When they finished speaking, they looked directly at your person and said something nobody forgot. The greatest pain is not rejection. The greatest pain is spending your life wondering what could have been. Those words struck your person harder than anyone realized. Because they reflected a fear they had carried silently for years. The fear that one day they would wake up older, looking back at their life, still wondering about you, still imagining alternate futures. Still questioning decisions that could never be changed. For the first time that evening, they felt something shifting inside them. Not certainty. Not confidence. Something deeper. The realization that avoiding pain had not actually protected them from it. Don't skip. Meanwhile, the family connected to the marriage proposal had begun noticing everything. They noticed how differently your person spoke when your name came up. They noticed the emotion that appeared in their eyes. They noticed the hesitation whenever someone discussed moving forward with another relationship. Eventually, one member of that family asked a question so direct that nobody could avoid it. If this person came back into your life tomorrow, what would you do? The room froze. Your person froze. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Then came the answer. The answer that changed everything. Your person admitted that they didn't know what would happen tomorrow. They didn't know what destiny had planned. They didn't know whether circumstances would ever allow your paths to cross again. But they also admitted something else, that if they learned that you still cared, if they learned that the connection still existed, if they learned that there was even a small chance, they would not ignore it. The room erupted into emotions. Some people looked shocked. Others looked relieved. A few even smiled. Because whether anyone agreed with the situation or not, they had finally received honesty. Pure honesty. And honesty has a way of changing everything. Don't skip. Later that night, after many of the relatives had left, a smaller conversation continued among close family members. It was during that discussion that an even more shocking truth emerged. One family member revealed something they had kept to themselves for months. They admitted they had occasionally noticed your person looking at old messages, old photographs, or old reminders connected to you. At the time they assumed it was temporary nostalgia. Now they realized it was something much deeper. Another relative revealed they had witnessed moments when your person suddenly became emotional after hearing your name mentioned unexpectedly. Someone else remembered a family gathering where marriage discussions had been brought up, only for your person to become unusually quiet for the rest of the evening. One by one, hidden pieces of the puzzle began coming together. And as they did, a realization spread through the room. This wasn't a forgotten story. This wasn't unfinished because of lack of feelings. It was unfinished because neither heart had ever truly let go. That possibility lingered heavily in the air. Nobody could prove it. Nobody could confirm it. Yet nobody could ignore it either. Don't skip. As midnight approached, your person finally found themselves alone. The noise of the evening faded. The questions faded. The opinions faded. For the first time all day, they were left alone with their thoughts. They sat quietly, replaying every conversation that had happened. Every confession. Every reaction. Every uncomfortable truth that had finally been spoken aloud, and that was when something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling embarrassed, they felt relieved. For years they had carried these emotions in silence. For years they had pretended they were gone. For years they had acted as though the chapter involving you was closed, yet after finally speaking the truth, they felt lighter. Not because the situation was solved. Not because answers suddenly appeared, but because they were no longer running from what their heart already knew. They cared. They always had. And despite everything that happened, despite time, distance, misunderstandings, and obstacles, those feelings had survived. The marriage proposal had been intended to create a new beginning. Instead, it exposed a truth that had been hiding beneath the surface all along. A truth about you. A truth about them. And a truth about a connection that destiny refused to erase. As your person stared into the quiet darkness of that night, one thought kept repeating itself over and over. Maybe this story was not over after all. Maybe the reason they could never fully move forward was because a part of their journey still remained unfinished. And somewhere deep inside their heart, a question began growing stronger than ever before. What if the person they were supposed to be building a future with had never been the new marriage match? What if it had always been you? Don't skip. That question refused to leave your person's mind. Long after the relatives went home, long after the conversations ended, and long after the house became silent, they remained awake replaying every moment from that day. The marriage proposal was supposed to bring clarity. It was supposed to help them move forward. Instead, it had forced them to confront feelings they had spent years trying to bury. Every argument they once used to convince themselves to let go suddenly felt weak. Every excuse sounded empty. Because no matter how hard they tried to focus on the future everyone wanted for them, their heart kept returning to the same place. You. The following morning felt different. Your person woke up carrying a strange mixture of emotions. There was confusion, fear, hope, regret, and something else they had not felt in a very long time. Possibility. For years they believed certain doors were permanently closed. They believed some opportunities only existed once. They believed destiny had already chosen a direction and there was nothing left to do except accept it. But after everything that happened during the marriage discussion, those beliefs no longer felt as certain as they once did. Questions had replaced certainty. Hope had replaced resignation. And deep inside, your person could no longer ignore what their heart was trying to tell them. Don't skip. Over the next few days, the family continued discussing what had happened. Some relatives believed the marriage proposal should continue. Others felt it would be unfair to move forward while such strong emotions still existed elsewhere. Opinions differed, but one thing remained consistent. Everyone kept talking about you. Everyone kept returning to the same shocking realization. The person they thought had moved on had never truly moved on at all. One evening, a close family member sat down with your person privately and asked a question that cut straight to the heart of everything. What scares you more? Losing them forever? Or trying and failing? The question lingered. Your person thought about it for a long time. Because for years they had acted as though failure was the greatest risk. But now they were beginning to understand something important. Never trying carried its own kind of pain. A pain that lasted much longer. A pain filled with unanswered questions. A pain filled with endless what-ifs. And suddenly they realized they had been carrying that pain every single day. Don't skip. As the days passed, memories became impossible to avoid. Small details returned unexpectedly. Conversations. Laughter. Moments that once seemed ordinary but now felt priceless. Your person remembered things they thought they had forgotten. They remembered the way you made difficult days easier. They remembered feeling understood without needing to explain everything. They remembered dreams they once shared silently with you. And with every memory, the truth became harder to deny. And no matter how much time had passed, your place in their heart had remained untouched. That realization frightened them. But it also gave them clarity. Because for the first time, they stopped asking themselves how to forget you. Instead, they began asking why they were still trying. Don't skip. Then came the moment nobody expected. A relative who had strongly supported the marriage proposal approached your person and said something shocking. I think we've all been looking at this the wrong way. Your person looked confused. The relative continued. We thought the problem was that you couldn't move on. But maybe that's not the problem at all. Maybe the real problem is that everyone assumed the story was over when it never actually ended. Those words landed deeply. Because they echoed what your heart had been trying to tell them for a very long time. Some connections fade. Some disappear. Some are meant to remain in the past. But others survive every attempt to erase them. Others continue living quietly beneath the surface no matter how much time passes. And yours was one of those connections. Don't skip. Weeks later, when the marriage proposal was mentioned again, something remarkable happened. Your person no longer sounded uncertain about their feelings. They no longer struggled to explain themselves. They no longer pretended everything was fine. Instead, they spoke with honesty. They admitted they could not build a future while ignoring the truth. They admitted they could not offer someone else a heart that was still holding on to another story. They admitted that no matter how practical a decision looked, it would never feel right if it required betraying what they truly felt. The room became silent once again. But this silence was different. It wasn't filled with confusion. It was filled with understanding. Because everyone could finally see what had been hidden for so long. The shocking truth was never about a secret. The shocking truth was about the depth of their feelings for you. Feelings that survived time. Feelings that survived distance. Feelings that survived doubt. Feelings that survived every attempt to move on.